Hello and welcome to the Neurodivergence and Mental Health podcast. My name is Sally Nilsson and I'm a psychotherapist, published author, public speaker and mum. I discovered my autism and ADHD aged 56 in March 2021, and having rewritten my life story, I'm on a quest to advocate for neurodivergent community. I hope you enjoy listening to my incredible guests sharing their experiences of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's and OCD. We talk about growing up, education, work and personal stories, and how mental health has played its part in shaping lives. Our conversations cover spectrums, traits, challenges, acceptance and successes. So sit back, relax and find out what it means to feel, think and be different in a neurotypical world. Hello and welcome to the Neurodivergence and Mental Health podcast. And I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Templeton. And I've discovered Sarah from lots of different places, really. But one of them was from the work that she does, which of course we're going to talk about today on the podcast. But she's such a busy person and she's a fantastic advocate for the ADHD and neurodivergence community as a whole. We've got lots to talk about, so I'm going to crack on. Hello, Sarah. Great to see you. I'm going to ask you, if I may, to just do a quick introduction, which is basically your name, roughly where you live, and what do you do within the neurodivergence community? Over to you.
Okay, hi and hello everybody. My name is Sarah Templeton and I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 51, nearly 52. So up until nearly 52, I had no idea that I had any neurodiversity whatsoever. Then out of the blue, a counsellor said to me, has anybody ever suggested your ADHD? And I was like, no, why? Thinking that ADHD was 9-year-old boys that chuck chairs at teachers. That really was as far as my knowledge went. And at the time I was nearly 52, I was managing director of a nanny agency and in a 10-year marriage. And when she said to me, has anybody ever suggested your ADHD? I really was like, no, why? And she said, well, go home and Google it because I think you are. So in 2015, I was diagnosed with moderate to severe combined ADHD. And in the next 5 years, I've gone on to discover and get myself diagnosed privately with, these are crackers, severe dyspraxia, with 1% processing and 1% 1% processing and 1% motor skills. So I kind of thought I might have dyspraxia, but I didn't quite realize I would have 1% for processing and motor skills. Sensory processing disorder, which is no great surprise because I think most people with ADHD have got that, or the vast majority. And then the other one, I can never say it. I say it wrong. I say dyscalculia, but I know it's dyscalculia. Which is the reason I failed my 12 plus. And as to where I live in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. And what I do with neurodiversity is I started off I qualified as a counsellor in 2015. Then I did a year of CBT. So that brought me to 16. I set up in private practice at the beginning of 2016. Started off just myself with a website with one page on it saying, I'm an ADHD. No, I am diagnosed ADHD myself. I didn't know if I'd ever meet another ADHD person in my life. I've gone from that 7 years ago to now we've got about 55, I think we are at the moment, therapists.
Wow.
All over the country. Yeah, it literally happened by accident. No great business plan of mine, honestly. No great entrepreneurial skills here. But I just kept getting loads and loads of clients. So I thought, because of all these clients, I better start finding other therapists that are good. So I started off with my supervisor, and my supervisor was the person who had been the counsellor who worked out it was ADHD. I asked her if she could be my supervisor and she said, I can, I just can't be your counsellor ever again. I said, that's fine. So she was my supervisor for 5 years and she taught me so much, that lady, absolutely phenomenal. So I started to refer clients to her initially, particularly couples, because I wasn't trained in couples and she was. So I started to send all the couples to her. Then I came across another lady in Wales on a Facebook group somewhere. And I said, would you like some clients? And she said, yes. And then it just kind of built to today. We are now approaching 60 therapists now, most counsellors, but a lot of coaches and counsellors combined. And then some people are, I say just coaches, I don't mean that negatively at all, because they're phenomenal, but they are not counsellors, they are just coaches. So we're kind of providing ADHD services and ASD, and also the comorbidities. I'm very passionate about the comorbidities because they get overlooked so much. So we work with clients UK, well, no, actually, I can now say internationally. It used to be UK wide. In the last year, we started to get a lot of clients from abroad. So we've now got clients in Canada, Croatia, France.
Wow.
Germany, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, Singapore. So all these people just find us, and our unique selling point is that we are all diagnosed ADHD.
And so, that's lovely and fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for telling me that. And you know, I mean, I can't believe how much you've grown in such a short period of time. And I want to talk to you more about that and get the name of it and everything else a bit later on, Sarah. So, you know, just back to your conditions. I mean, you know, we call it what you want. So ADHD and dyspraxia. Dyspraxia. I call it dyscalculia, and I'm going to keep calling it dyscalculia.
Oh, good, yeah.
So I don't have a formal diagnosis of dyspraxia and dyscalculia, but what I do know is that they couldn't come up with an exam for maths so I wouldn't fail. I found maths painful and impossible. And as for dyspraxia, or DCD, whatever you want to call it, I spent my whole childhood with scabby knees. And in 2020, I broke both my ankles for no apparent reason. I bump into things, I chip all the plates and glasses and mugs. Tell us a little about how these conditions have affected you, these two, dyscalculia and dyspraxia.
Let's start with dyscalculia. Dyscalculia has ruined my life. It's not too strong a thing to say, because I failed my 12 plus because of it. So when I was at school, I was quite bright. I was in the top third of my class. We were a class of just over 30. And when it came to the 12 plus, because it was all problems, because it was all, Tom's got 3 green apples and 4 red apples, and John's got 5 bananas and 3 grapes, and Rosie's got 3 apples and 3 pears. How many shoes does Sarah wear? I was, I don't give a monkey. I just looked at these things and thought, I don't even care. I just don't care. I'm not interested, and I'm certainly not working it out. My brain just didn't work that way. So what happened was I failed that 12 plus, and before the results even came out, my headmaster, who knew I was bright, had appealed to the county. When the results came out, my mum then appealed to the county, because everybody knew I should have passed. I was in the top third of the class, and the top 50% had passed. You know, I was well in that top 15. Every exams I came sort of 8th, 10th out of 30. So the top 15 of them passed, and I failed. So what happened was they went to the county, and the county looked at my 12 plus and said, no, she has failed so spectacularly, that was their words, so spectacularly, we can't put her through. So I was sent to, I'm going to be really polite here and say the stupid school. I don't mean the special needs school. It wasn't a special needs school. It was just a school for people who weren't interested in education, and I was. I was really bright. I loved learning. I was like a sponge, you know. So I get sent to this school where all the girls wanted to do was go out with boys and get pregnant at 13. So I was not like that. I was studying. So in the first year, I came top out of 130 in English and in maths, because I could do maths. So the headmistress, without me knowing, the headmistress rang my mother and said, this child shouldn't be at this school. I've got to replace at the grammar school. She sent my mum the list of school uniform, and my mum couldn't afford it. So I didn't even know that had happened till I was 16. My mum didn't tell me. And I had just wasted 4 years being bored out of my skull. You can imagine with ADHD, not stimulated at all, not getting maths, hating. I also had a horrible maths teacher and a brilliant English teacher. It was my English
that makes all the difference, doesn't it, when you're
100%,
absolutely
100%. I completely respected my English teacher because she talked to me with respect, and I got an A for English and an ungraded for maths, because the maths teacher, I thought she was rude. I thought she was ignorant. She was what's the word? She was the least person-centered person. She just used to shout at you all the time. I had no respect for her. And so when I looked at the maths O level, I looked at it, I wrote my name and the date and thought, nah, sod you, love, I'm not even doing it. And I didn't even do my maths O level. I just didn't do it, name and the date. So I got ungraded. An A for English. So if anybody had been looking back then, and this is what makes me so angry now about schools and the education system, anybody looking at a child with so wildly differing grades as an A and a U, somebody should have looked at that and thought, hello, there's something going on there. But they never did. So I kind of, half of me blames my mother because she should have found the money for the uniform and put me in the grammar school. But I wasted 4 years and ended up getting 4 rubbishy O levels, because half of my teachers couldn't even take me to O level. They could only teach me to CSE. It was that poor a school. So I did get 4 O levels, which was a minor miracle from a school like that. Didn't go to university, went to college. So I firmly believe my undiagnosed dyscalculia was responsible for screwing up my education from the age of 12. And that's why I can't begin to tell you how passionate I am about kids getting the right diagnosis, and not just that ADHD diagnosis.
I think
it's got to be all the comorbidities. It's got to be.
I'll just repeat that experience is exactly the same as mine. And I mean, I didn't know anything about it. Of course I didn't. And I can't even remember if I had any feelings about it. I couldn't do maths, and that was that. And I was absolutely brilliant at English. But how about the dyspraxia side of it? Because I definitely know that I was never picked for teams. I loved netball as long as I could be goal attack, and as long as I was under the net, I could get it in. But I never got picked for teams, and I was always falling over and bumping into. I was
I was a bit the opposite. I was a bit the opposite. I was always picked for the netball team, and I was always goal defence. And I swear, had I been diagnosed at the right age, I would have been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, because I can have a fight with a paper bag if it looks at me the wrong way. So when people used to come at me with that ball, they were not getting anywhere near my net, because I was very much in charge of my net, and I was tall. So I was, I fought like a dog to keep people away from my goalpost. So I was goal defence for the school team for the whole 4 years. So my competitive nature is very, very strong. But going to the dyspraxia thing, I have got it severely, and the signs of it looking back were that I was always very, very, very hard with my pens. I would always write push very hard with my pencil. And so it would, the print would always show at least 2 or 3 pages underneath, which is why I've got perfectionism diagnosed with my ADHD, which is why I've started so many notepads, ruined it by pressing too hard on the top page, turned the page and thought, oh, that's ruined, and thrown it away because I pressed too hard. So when I had my dyspraxia assessment, the sort of thing she got me to do was stand on one leg, which I fell over straight away.
Oh, yeah.
Can't do that.
Not a hope.
Then she got me to make a cup of tea, which she videoed me doing. And I didn't think I was this bad, but I dropped the mug. I dropped the mug on the glass protector thing. I dropped the tea bags when they came out. And then when I played the video back afterwards, I thought, my God, even I can't believe I'm that heavy handed. Just making a cup of tea. It was clonk, 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 clonk. And then, like you, falling over. I always remember my very first day at school. I was so excited about going to school. I was 5, and I got my brand new red tights on and my red school uniform, which I loved at my first school. And I was skipping on the way to school because I was so excited, fell flat on my face. And ripped my red tights on my first. I know. So my dyspraxia has been falling over. Nearly every first date I've been on, this is so embarrassing. Nearly every first date I have fallen over on. I mean,
get that out of the way. Get that embarrassing bit out of the way. And then
nearly every day I fall and smack on my face. I fall over a lot. I drop food down myself, ridiculous amounts. If you can see my hand, other people can't. You can see that at the moment. That's all the red marks where I hit it on the oven. I've got three red marks on my hand at the moment. I broke my finger a couple of years ago, kept going to the hospital, and they said that every single person I saw at the hospital, first question, how did you do it? I said, I've no idea. They said, you must know. I said, no, I've got ADHD. I'm very inattentive. I don't notice a lot of things. And at this time, I didn't know I'd got dyspraxia. So I was constantly breaking bones and fingers and loads of things. But I didn't know how, because my ADHD and attention is really high. I don't notice loads of things. So I can break things, bruise things, damage things, have green lumps on my legs. No idea how I've done it.
And so that's it, isn't
combined,
it? Yeah, with the bruising.
Combined with the ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, I was always covered in bruises. And the other thing to chuck in as well is I mean, I only got diagnosed for both of mine, autism and ADHD, in March 21. And so I've done so much research.
Wow.
But, you know, with all the sensory stuff, I mean, I'm very olfactory. I'm very, you know, I've got auditory processing disorder. Light, you know, daylight, taste, you know, hot, spicy food, all sorts of things like that. You know, I've read that you also have sensory, I don't like disorder, sensory processing differences, whatever. How does that manifest for you, Sarah?
Well, I'm so glad I know I've got it now, because it explains why 3/4 of food I don't eat. I don't eat, for example, I don't eat raisins, currants, sultanas, anything like that. I don't eat prunes. Anything that's wrinkly, it's never going near my mouth. Things that are disgusting colour, for me, a disgusting colour. Avocado, I've looked at that. People keep saying, do you like avocado? I say, I've no idea, but it's never going near my mouth. I'll never know. I'm not putting green slush in my mouth. I'm sorry. So I'm very funny about things. How does it play out though? This is a terrible thing to admit, but it's true. I have a particular hatred of people that talk in cinemas and theatres, because as soon as they start talking, that's all I can hear.
Yes.
And I love going to the theatre. I used to act a lot myself. And I used to be a theatre reviewer for 5 years for local newspapers. Oh. I'm a big theatre goer, you know, and I know my theatre, and I like to concentrate, and any person talking drives me insane. But years ago, I was in my 20s. This was 25 years before I was diagnosed ADHD. There was somebody in front of me in a cinema who was talking. I kept going, shh, doing all my normal, you know, for goodness sake, I wish people would shut up. And it wasn't working. And impulsively, this is probably the most dangerous thing I've ever done. I had no idea I was going to do this. There was no plan at all. But suddenly I leant forward, I picked the person up by their coat, I pulled them out of their seat, and I screamed in their face. I won't scream what I screamed because it included a very rude swear word, but it was shut the up. And then I threw them back down in their seat. And when I sat down, I was like, oh my God, I genuinely didn't know I was going to do that. But
what did they do?
They shut up. They didn't say another word for the whole of the rest of the film. But I was almost scared of myself, because I just hadn't got, that was not planned. There was no thought. It just happened.
It's a big trigger. It's a really big trigger, something like that. Well, I can't stand it when you can see people's phones in the dark because I go to the cinema.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody in the front, and I haven't had to do it yet, but I always have popcorn because carbs, sugar, love it.
Oh, you have to. I agree. Yeah.
I'll just start chucking it. I'm waiting for the time that I'll do that. So thanks for telling me that. That's brilliant.
No, you're not alone. I've thought about taking a water pistol into the cinema and actually spraying water at people. I've never done it. I've never done it, but I'm with you. I usually now what I do is just get up and move. I just move somewhere else.
Yeah, we have to learn things, don't we? Because we're telling our clients to do it. We're going to try and do it ourselves. So, you know, you've given me a little bit about growing up, but really, you know, just to kind of focus on, because, you know, we're a similar age really, and we were at school and we had no idea about ourselves. It wasn't invented then, was it? So for you growing up, just tell us a little bit about your childhood, you know, school and education. Well, you've told us about school and education roughly, but what sort of difficulties did you encounter, you know, in retrospect now, looking back, you know, now that you know what you know, especially what the teachers were like, you know, how did you get on with certain teachers? And were some of them just really awful because you couldn't sit still, or because of attention?
For me, there's a massive difference between my infant and junior school, which I loved, and my senior school, which I hated. So at my infant and junior, all very good teachers, bar one, we'll avoid her. The rest of them were very, very good teachers, taught you with respect, and we were very advanced. So for example, we were doing a third year grammar school maths when we were 11. So they were pushing us, you know, and I love that because I loved learning, and I had great teachers. I was house captain. I was so happy at that school and so stretched and so appreciated and valued. It was wonderful. And then I went, and as I say, I had a very good headmaster because he's the one who appealed for me before the results were even out, because he respected me, I respected him. There was a lot of nourishment and nurturing at that school. We were all very well looked after, very cared about. They were passionate about us doing well, and I loved it. Then I got thrown into this school that was chock-a-block with, well, it was chock-a-block with a fair few ADHD people who got removed and sent to the special needs school. Now I look back, I see these girls, you know, there were some girls that I thought were I thought at the time they were hysterically funny, because they were the girls that would tell the headmistress, "Oh, fuck off," you know. And then I'd think, "Oh my God, how can they say that?" Because I was always a bit, I didn't want to be told off, you know. I had a very strong mother at home who would have really ripped into me if I'd have been given detention or anything. So I was always quite well behaved at school. And these girls who were just so rude and irreverent to the teachers, I thought they were hysterical, which I now know is my ADHD. You know, I'm loving anybody being rude and telling anybody to F off. But all those girls were removed and sent to the special needs school.
What a shame though, because they were fun, and I
they
loved
were
them
brilliant.
as well. Problem
Yeah.
is though, you put autism in there as well, and so I would see these people that were really big risk takers, and all the makeup and the skirts up the bottoms and all the rest of it, and I would just taken, you know, straight in like an arrow. You've got to be my friend, and got bullied terribly about that. Did you get bullied at secondary school?
I did get bullied at secondary school. Yeah, I did, because I was kind of this goody two shoes who wanted to learn and be educated. So of course the girls who they'd come from different schools to me. I'd gone to this really lovely junior school. They'd gone to rough infant schools, you know, and they came in, they were used to fighting, they were used to going out with boys when they were 12, they were used to going to the youth club and drinking and all that. I wasn't like that at all. But because I was so prim and I'd come from this very good junior school, I did get bullied, and I got bullied badly when I was about 13, 14. It was horrendous. I was bullied so badly, I was allowed out of school 5 minutes early to run. I used to get out of that school and run like hell to get away from them. One day I was sitting in science, and a girl just put her hand on the back of my head. You know, in science you used to have really high stools, or we did. She put her hand on the back of my head and she yanked me off, and she yanked me backwards off the stool, and I ended up on the floor. As I got up, clambered up and got back on the stool, we were in the back row, so the teacher hadn't noticed. I said to her, "What was that for?" And she looked and she went, "Just because." And it was that sort of school, you know, just terrible school. So I loathed and despised my secondary school, and I became quite belligerent. I set up this thing at that school. They used to give badges to everybody. You got deportment badges, and you got badges for this, badges for that, badges for the other. So me and a couple of other girls who I think are probably ADHD as well, we set up this thing called the ABC, which was the anti-badge campaign. And this was the first of my campaigning. And we campaigned, and our big moment came when one of our members, Shirley, was presented with her prefect badge on stage, and she said, "In the name of the ABC, I pass this badge back. It's meaningless. I don't want it."
I love it.
So the anti-badge campaign. So I've been a campaigner since I was about 14, really.
It's natural for us, isn't it, Sarah? And I mean, I've always been a mini campaigner, but I go on marches, and I've helped refugees. I've done dog poo campaigns. I've written a book about someone, you know, the underdog. And actually I had a fantastic conversation with one of my other guests, and one of my biggest traits for ADHD is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. But it's not just my own rejection. I can't bear the suffering of others, especially if it's unjust. So it's kind of like that, you know. So what happened after secondary school? Did you go to college, and what did you study?
I had a very controlling mother, and she didn't let me go and do my A-levels. I was accepted to do A-levels in drama, theatre arts and English, which is what I really wanted to do. But my mother said, "No, you're not doing that. You're going to college and training to be a secretary," which was the most stupid thing, because I'm no secretary. Anyway, I went to college and did that for a year, and then I went to work in London, and I worked in London from 17 to 23. When I did loads of secretarial jobs. I worked in advertising, which was amazing. I had a brilliant job at McCann Erickson, which is one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world, and I loved that job. But I screwed them all up, because after I was nervous in every single job. I was nervous for the first 3 months, because I didn't know what I was doing. 3 to 6 months I was happy and I was loving it. 6 to 9 months I was bored stupid, and I left at 9 months, every single job, because I didn't know I was ADHD then. But once I'd got to learn it and knew it, I was like, well, what next? So I kept leaving. And then at 23, 4, I went to Australia for a year, and I did a year traveling, came back, and since that day I've worked in recruitment. Apart from the counselling, I set up my own agency when I was 25, because I'd worked for 2 women who I knew I was better than. talk about ADHD traits of knowing best and wanting things your own way. I knew I was better than these women, and I was making them tens of thousands of pounds. I thought, sod this, I'll do it myself. So I set up my own agency when I was 25, and that still exists to this day. It's still around. I've got somebody running it for me now. It's morphed into an agency that still we recruit nannies a lot now, because in the area I live, nannies are very big. But we also now recruit we recruit staff for neurodivergent people, mostly those who've been awarded access to work. So when people are awarded access to work, and they get what do they get? Bookkeepers, they get admin support, they get social media support and all this. We recruit the staff for them who understand neurodiversity. So we've gone into neurodiversity recruitment basically, but that agency still does exist.
Do you know, I think we're twins.
Yeah.
So I did secretarial after 5 O-levels, went to, I took some retakes, they didn't work either, but I ended up in college, did my RSA, started in admin, then worked for Philips Lighting on the order desk and discovered that I was an amazing salesperson, went into advertising, then went into exhibitions, and I did recruitment.
Oh my God, we are similar. Oh my God.
I went into recruitment as well, and advertising. So it's advertising and exhibitions, lots of drama in my past.
Yeah.
And
we are twins.
I know, we're twins. We're twins.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
the
love
first
that.
time I've heard the word RSA in a long time, but you're right, it was RSA.
And I love my shorthand. I really enjoyed that. And so, you know, very, very sort of similar. And I'm just having a look at this, you know, I'm just having a look at time and what we're doing. And you're so good at giving me information that you're filling in some of the questions already. So there's no, I'm not going to repeat those.
I can talk.
No, it's brilliant. It's really, really good. Okay, so you were diagnosed at 51, and so many people are on really, it's just, you know, my clients who they're coming to me with anxiety and different traits, and then I'm observing. I mean, obviously I don't assess or diagnose, but I say, have you ever thought you, at the end when the time is right, have you ever thought you might be ADHD? And off we go on the journey. But this very, very long waiting list to get assessed and diagnosed. It's horrendous. So what was your diagnosis journey like? And I think you mentioned earlier, or it may have been before, that you're combined. Just tell me a little bit about that assessment diagnosis journey.
There is a story to that. I went, first of all, this counsellor said, go home and Google it. I went home and Googled it, and my entire life made sense. I knew from that second I was ADHD. I was everything. Everything on that list was me.
Yeah.
So I went to my GP, and twice I was knocked back by two different GPs who said the exact same words: there's no money in the NHS for adult ADHD. So I went back to my counsellor. She said, go private then. So I went up to see a chap in London. I was living in Poole in Dorset at the time. Went up to London to see this supposed ADHD specialist, who spent 2.5 hours with me. And at the end of it, he said, you can't be ADHD because you weren't diagnosed as a child. So I went back down to Dorset. That's what he said. You cannot be ADHD because you were not diagnosed as a child. So I went back down to Dorset, and I said to my supervisor, I'm not ADHD. Sorry, she was my counsellor at the time. I'm not ADHD. We carried on talking for a couple of minutes, and she said these now famous words. I hope you're okay with it. A mild swear word here. I don't think it's a swear word even.
No, it's okay.
She actually said, Sarah, she said, I'm sorry, but this is bollocks. You are ADHD. You've got to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So by this time, I'd gone onto some websites, some Facebook groups, and I'd been making notes of all my traits, because once I was starting to realise what ADHD is, and I wrote 4 sheets, typed up 4 sheets of ADHD traits under all the headings, you know. And I found on these Facebook groups somebody who recommended an ADHD specialist psychiatrist, and I booked to see him. He was in Essex at the time. A dear man, but I think he's retired now. But I sent him this paperwork in advance, and I said, you might want to have a look at this before I arrive, or you might not, but here it is. Anyway, he rang me the night before, and I was in Poole, he was in Essex. He said, Sarah, don't make the trip tomorrow. He said, I've just read all this. He said, it's screamingly obvious you're ADHD. What's your doctor playing at? And I said, well, he just won't refer me. He said, right, leave it to me. And this man, he didn't charge me a penny. Wow. He wrote to my doctor. He wrote and he said, what are you playing at? This girl is obviously ADHD. He did ask me a couple of questions. He said, right, that rules out bipolar. He said, you're definitely ADHD. So then my doctor, with a kick up the bottom from a private psychiatrist, referred me to a hospital 5 miles up the road. Bearing in mind I was in Poole. This hospital was in between Poole and Bournemouth, where there was an adult ADHD psychiatrist. I went and sat in front of him 3 months later, and he took one look at me, just a look, and said, well, I don't think you're ADHD. just by looking at me.
No.
And I said, well, do you mind just looking at that paperwork? I've written 4, there's a load of paperwork there, the same 4 sheets. He looked down sheet 1, turned the paper to the top of sheet 2 and went, oh yeah, okay, you obviously are ADHD. And that was my diagnosis. I worked out I was ADHD. But the funny thing was, down there, I was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. Now, it meant nothing to me at the time because I knew so little about ADHD, inattentive. When I then moved back up to Bucks, which is where I was from and where I really lived, I was only in Dorset temporarily, but I was back in Bucks. And I said, here's my ADHD diagnosis on my NHS headed paper. They said, oh, we're not going to acknowledge that. We need you to be assessed and diagnosed again. I said, excuse me.
That's
I said,
incredible.
Is that not a bit of a waste of money, with all due respect? I've just had this, I've had this within months down in Dorset. That's NHS headed paper there. They went, no, you. And in the end, I was going to argue it, but I thought, no, because you come back to Bucks, you're now working with more and more ADHD clients, go through the process up here. So I went through the whole process up here and was diagnosed with moderate to severe combined ADHD. I then said to the psychologist who diagnosed me, I said, that's funny, because I was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD down in Dorset, and I've since done a lot of research. There's no way I am inattentive ADHD. Now, the NHS psychologist said to me, she said, oh, that's because we've got lazy, Sarah. We diagnose adults with inattentive ADHD because we assume they've outgrown the hyperactivity.
And women as well, because somewhere in some manual they said no, it's only boys that get hyperactive and girls.
Well, that's very insulting to those of us girls that have got both. But I thought it was quite fascinating that it was an NHS psychologist saying to me, the NHS have got lazy. We diagnose all women with inattentive ADHD, having assumed you've outgrown hyperactivity. But she diagnosed me with combined. And I know I'm combined. Now I know about ADHD. I know I'm off the scale combined. I've got it all going on.
Yeah, me too. And I haven't gone for formal diagnosis for ADHD because I don't know. I don't need to. I know what I am. I have for my autism because as a psychotherapist, I wanted a bit of paper for that, but I'm not going to bother with ADHD. And for me personally, I don't take meds. I just try and, I've lived 56 years and I just have to sort of practice what I preach. So that's a pretty big journey that you've had and a difficult one.
But I was determined because once you find out, well, for me, because I've spent, I was 52 there, just coming up 52. I had spent 52 years being told I talk too quick, I interrupt people, I fidget, I don't sit still in theatres. I was constantly buying houses, buying cars, buying businesses, changing businesses. I was exhausted, and I kind of wanted to know if there was a reason for all of this. And for me, and I know everybody's different, some people don't need the diagnosis, for some they just do not need it. For me, it was critical. I wanted to know exactly why I was the way I was, why my mother has been the way she's been with me all my life. She's constantly criticized me all the time because I've not been this neat, tidy, pretty little girl in twin sets and pearls. I've been this tomboy thumping around, dropping dinner down me, falling over, breaking things, shouting, talking. I've been all the things that my mother hadn't wanted me to be, and I wanted to know why. But
what about your mum and dad? Being over 80% genetic,
massively.
Well, what about in your family?
My dad. It came from my dad, 100%. My dad died when he was 23 of cardiac, which again can be linked to ADHD because they're getting very stressed.
Yeah.
So my dad was overweight, was a womanizer, had loads of affairs, changed jobs all the time, changed his car all the time, was the life and soul of the party. 100% it came from my dad, and 100% it came from his mum. She was exactly the same. But interestingly, in my family, my mother has been divorced 4 times. Only my mother could have married 2 ADHD men with the different kinds. So I have a brother from the same mum with a different dad, and he's very inattentive ADHD. So my brother, who's 11 years younger than me, is highly, very, very severely inattentive ADHD, and I'm very combined. So my poor old mother has got 2 kids with both. It's very confusing for a woman in her 80s to understand that these 2 kids who are polar opposites can both have this condition called ADHD. It's blown her mind.
It is.
She could just about accept that I had it, but not him as well.
No, and it's horrible. What I've discovered now, because I've lost both my parents have gone, but what I thought was, I forgive them and everything else. There were some tough times. There was some really tough times. But the thing was, my father was neurotypical, but he'd been in the Navy. He was a commando. His name was Beverly, so he had big
My
muscles.
dad was in the Navy. We really are twins.
Yeah, and he was a bit of a narcissist. He was a bit controlling and a bully, but an absolute charmer to everyone else in the world. But what used to happen is, because my mum, who I'm not sure if she was autistic ADHD, it doesn't matter now because she's not here, but the thing is that she couldn't handle my behaviors and the way I was, so she'd pass me over to my dad, and that was the worst thing to ever do, because he was neurotypical and didn't understand me, and that was very hard. And if you had a neurotypical mum, do you mind me asking, it's not on the questions, you don't have to if you don't want to, but how was that for you?
It was blooming hard. I do think my mum is neurotypical. My supervisor is utterly convinced she's a narcissist. And
here we go.
Utterly convinced she's a narcissist, but not ADHD, I don't think. But we think all 3 children are ADHD. Yeah. But for me, it was very, very difficult because I live with my mum. So when I live with my mum, but that my mum and dad split up when I was 5, and I used to spend a lot of time with my dad. We saw him every week, you know. And when I was with my dad, all I can say is that everything was easy. You know, he wanted to eat loads of chocolate as well. He wanted to slob out on the sofa and watch the telly. He would stay up late. He would do all these things that I did. He bit his nails even. I bit my nails.
Yeah.
Everything with my mum was hard work, because I was never neat enough for her. I was never quiet enough. I was constantly hearing, you should be seen and not heard. Can you imagine an ADHD kid wanting to be seen and not heard? I was clomping around with the dyspraxia, wanting to talk, or constantly feeling that I knew best. She would always be shouting at me, why do you think you know best about everything? I don't know why I thought best, but I did think I knew best, and now I know it's an ADHD trait. So for me, the whole relationship with my mum was just one battle from day one, and it still is. I'm 58 now. It's still the same. I still don't have my hair the way she likes it. She doesn't like the fact I've grown my fringe out. She doesn't like the colour of my hair. She's been critical my whole life, my mum.
It's so hard
because I'm just not what she wants.
No, and it is traumatizing, and it is difficult. And when they're both gone, there is relief, quite frankly. And love them to bits and everything else. My mum is just down there in a bamboo urn. Hi, mum. Anyway, so we're just going to march on, if that's okay, because I'm looking at the time and we've got an hour, and I want to make sure we get it all in because you've got loads of stuff. So again, thank you. So many ADHD folks have difficulties with the transmission of dopamine and feel a great need to be, they are impulsive, leading to addictions. And in the past, I had a drinking problem. I smoked cigarettes, and I was pretty bad. I am pretty bad with carbs and sugar. Oh my God. I think I need to see a specialist, particularly about sugar and spending. So addictions come in many forms, and when mental health challenges are mixed in with them, we can really struggle. So what's been your personal experience with addiction, if any? And do you find your clients come to you with similar negative habits, or are there a whole range of different addictions that they come to you with?
Well, mine are pretty much the same as yours. Mine has been food and sugar. I spent my entire life trying to diet and trying to lose weight and doing very, very well. And then it would all go to pot. And I now look back and realize that was because as long as I was dieting and being sensible, I was fine. But then if I'd have one Mars bar, I would eat 8. Now, I now realise that was the old dopamine in the brain going, yes, we like that, we'll have a bit more of that, thank you very much. And that was the compulsive eating. So I felt I had no control over myself, and that's why I hated myself a lot of my life. And it's interesting because a lot of my friends used to say to me, Sarah, you're a really strange person because you achieve everything you want. There's nothing you don't do, and you will not be told what to do. You're totally in charge of everything. You achieve everything, but the one thing you can't do anything about is your weight. And it perplexed me as well. But when I was diagnosed ADHD, I was like, oh my God, that's why. So when I was diagnosed ADHD, I think I was at my highest then. I got to the point where I was a size 24, but I wasn't really 24, but I would not buy bigger than a 24. So I used to buy 24s that were elasticated because I wouldn't go bigger. If truth be told, I was probably about a 26, maybe even a 28 in dress size. However, went on the ADHD meds, all the binge eating stopped, and I'm now in size 14 to 16s. And I don't really want to be much smaller because, well, you know, when you get to my age, you get a bit scraggy. So I'm very happy.
I keep doing that in the mirror, trying to push my cheeks
I'm ready
up.
For the neck lift.
I know. Anyway, I don't care. I'm fed up with that now. You know, I'm 57 in March. but I don't like odd numbers. And so I'm not going to be 57 in March. I'm going to be 58. And then I'm not going to be 59. I'm going to be 60. So,
I see. So do you want me to answer the second part of your question?
I was just going to say, what do you think about your clients? Are they similar?
My addictions were most definitely food and buying things. That's where I had no control. So I used to buy. I still have deliveries from Amazon every single day. And food. They were my big addictions. I did go through a drinking patch in my 20s, especially when I was in Australia. But really, I've always swerved drugs because I'm frightened. I'm the person that would take ecstasy once and drop dead. I know. So I've always swerved drugs. I've never done it. But I have done alcohol a bit, especially in my 20s, and it did get a bit out of hand. I was drinking a box of wine a day when I was in Australia. I was thinking, this is not good. So I don't drink at all now. But the clients I see with addiction is very, very interesting. A lot of the women, it's food. A lot of the men, it's alcohol. I would generalizing terribly here, but I would say a lot of the men, it's alcohol. A lot of the women, it's food. And then there's a lot of crossovers. I've also seen a good few clients where promiscuity in its various forms has been destroying them, because all the ones I've worked with have been in very good relationships and very in love with their partner, but their risk-taking and thrill-seeking around promiscuity has been putting things massively at risk. And I've had a lot of people with that. I've also worked with gamblers, a fair few people with I've worked with some gamblers who've lost everything: houses, wives, cars, children, everything, lost a lot, and ended up homeless and on the streets. So I've seen from the gambling side as well. I've worked with a good few of them. But I would say on the whole, when it's ADHD and addiction, more people I work with, it's food, it's shopping, it's alcohol and drugs and promiscuity. They're the main ones that I see.
That's so, thank you so much. I mean, that is so interesting. That is, and I'm seeing the same. So it's reflected in my therapy room. I'm seeing the same as well. And promiscuity, I was very promiscuous. Apart from the fact I had 25 jobs, loads and loads of jobs, I was also promiscuous. But it never hurt me because it was like a dopamine thing, really. And but now I've been married 25 years next year, and I've been completely magnanimous. I'm like a wandering albatross. I'm different now. But I had certainly sowed the old wild oats. So this is the question I was very interested in asking you, please. And I want to ask you about this and about what you're doing work-wise at the moment. But I understand that there are so many people, young people and adults in the prison population who are thought to, who do have, not thought to have, they have got ADHD. And I know that this is something close to your heart. And I'd like you, if you would, to tell us about that. Tell us about what stats you have and what work you did within prisons and youth institutions, Sarah.
Okay. Well, it started because I started working with the homeless as a volunteer. That led into working with different charities who work with ex-offenders. I loved it, and I decided I wanted to work in a prison. So I started to volunteer in a prison, and I loved it. I could never understand why I got on so brilliantly with these offenders. I always explained it was like magic. Some magic happened between me and all of them. I love them and they love me. I had no idea why. Then fast forward, I got diagnosed, and I was working in Aylesbury prison at that time, which is a young offender institute. Over a year, I had 6 clients. Of those 6 boys, 3 of them were diagnosed ADHD as children, but were not on medication. Of the other 3, I think one of them probably wasn't ADHD. The other 2, I've got diagnosed ADHD since they've come out. So 5 out of 6 clients were ADHD. I've worked in 4 prisons. I don't know the exact numbers. What makes me very angry, though, is people who pretend they do. People who say, oh, it's 30% of people in prison. How do they know that? Because most of these people in prison haven't got a clue they've got ADHD. What they will tell you is, and I've had many clients say this to me, I think differently, Sarah. I've got a different brain to everybody else. I don't think like other people. That's one of the boys that I've just got diagnosed. Loads and loads of them. So I will not put a figure on it, but there's one figure that I do use. On one of the ADHD adult Facebook groups, there's a lady who's a mental health nurse and has worked in prisons for 20 years.
So she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah. Now, whenever somebody puts up, oh, there's 30%, and she and I get on these threads and go, no, it's masses more than that. She always says, look, I've been a mental health nurse in the prison service for 20 years. I estimated at 85%.
Wow.
Yeah, and I always say to her, you know, I bow to you because you've seen way more of them than I have, but I've worked in 4 prisons. I would say in Young Offenders Institute, if somebody forced me to put a figure on it, in Young Offender Institutes, I'd say it's a good 80-85%.
That's
I think
incredible.
as you get older into adult prisons, you get some of the different crimes. You get the fraud, and you get, you know, the non-naughty stuff. Do you know what I mean? The cleverer stuff, the cyber crime and all that.
Yeah.
I think the ratio comes down in adult prisons, and I would put it at somewhere around, if I had to put a figure on it, somewhere around about 60-70%, something like that. It's still a heck of a lot of them. And the interesting thing is as well, it's the same with women. We forget the women that are in prison.
Yes.
But when I worked for SMART Addiction Services, they had a service where everybody, all the women coming out of prison, came there first of all to get their script and to get, you know, blah blah. Every female that I saw coming out of prison in the whole year that I worked there, every single one of them was ADHD. All those girls. So
that's remarkable. And that, yeah. and I feel so good that you've been able to tell me that, because as advocates and justice and trying to do something, we have got to absolutely, with those sort of figures, we've got to get to Parliament. We've got to rattle, you know, like you imagine prison bars, we've got to rattle these cages and say, what the hell are you doing? You know, and going right back to grassroots, right back to parents, to school and everything else. We can't have all these people that are not diagnosed and looked after and supported and perhaps medicalized, whatever they need, to just leave the education, well, if they've had an education system, just going straight into prisons. I mean, that's just horrendous, isn't it, Sarah?
Well, it's the thing that makes me very angry, which is why I've got 2 companies. I've got a therapy company. I've got another one called Head Stuff ADHD Liberty. Head Stuff ADHD Liberty is all about keeping people out of prison. And we've now set up a charity called ADHD Liberty, and we do exactly what you've just said. We are campaigning at government level, and within the charity, we have this is a story you'll love. A neuro consultant rang me up from the John Radcliffe Hospital about a year ago. She said, are you the Sarah Templeton that's angry about the ADHD in prisons? I said, yep, that's me. Why? She said, I'm a neuro consultant at the John Radcliffe Hospital. I'm getting numerous boys brought in here from the prisons, the same boys over and over and over and over again. And she said, I've just begun to realise they're all ADHD. And she said, I went and asked my powers that be, bearing in mind she's a neuro consultant, she's quite high anyway.
Yes.
She went and asked her superiors if she could diagnose these boys, because she's allowed to, she's qualified to. And she was told, and I quote, no, they're not worth it. Because they're offenders, right? But she was so angry, she rang me up and she had a rant down the phone for an hour. And I said, I agree with everything you're saying, love, 100%. So she's part of my charity now. I've also got 2 ADHD psychiatrists who are passionate about the situation in prisons. I've got 2, wait for this, serving Metropolitan Police officers who are both ADHD. Both know that all the people coming in their police stations are ADHD, and they're with me on the charity. I've got numerous prison officers, probation officers. All these people know that the prisons are packed to the rafters with ADHD.
Yeah.
I made a speech at the Houses of Parliament about 3 years ago, just before COVID, in front of the Justice Minister. Yeah. And I said, look, this is ridiculous and it's so easy to change. All you've got to do is test them on the induction wings for ADHD. And when they first go into a prison, tick box thing, 10 questions, bang, bang, bang. If they answer enough of them, it's worth pursuing the ADHD thing. The Justice Minister was fully for it. He said, I totally agree. He said, I've got a diagnosed ADHD son, Sarah. I'm totally behind you on this. He said, I can see him going down this route if we're not careful. I'm totally up for it. But then COVID hit and it all stopped. So we're starting it again now with the neuroconsultant, with the psychiatrist, with the police. We're going back to government saying this has got to change. There are other people that have tried to do this. I know it's difficult, but, you know, they've given up because for whatever reasons. Yes. I am not giving up. I swore when I left the prison service in 2016, I would not forget all those tens of thousands of boys trapped behind bars because they've not got the right diagnosis and the right meds. Can I tell you one more quick story?
Yes, please do. Yes.
One of my Portland prison boys who was screaming ADHD, when he got out of prison, I was in contact with his probation. And I rang his probation one day and I said, look, your job is to keep him out of prison. He's been in and out. He's 33, been in and out constantly. I said, your job's to keep him out of prison. I'm going to tell you how to do that. He's severely ADHD. He needs a diagnosis. He needs meds and he'll stop. Now that probation, which shall remain nameless, I don't know how they got them, but they got 2 weeks worth of ADHD meds. They gave that boy the ADHD meds.
Yes.
He rang me up during that fortnight and he said, Sarah, he said, I can't guarantee this, but I think if I'd been on these meds all my life, I don't think I'd have committed any of those crimes because I feel completely different.
Yeah.
Then the ADHD meds ran out and he got put in prison for the crime that he'd just done. However, me and his probation pushed for Bristol ADHD Centre to go into Bristol prison and diagnose him, which he is now diagnosed and he's on the meds. So we are making a difference in tiny, tiny, tiny ways.
Yes.
But this needs to be blanket. It needs to be every police station needs to have an ADHD and an ASD test. Very quick tick box test.
Yes.
And they also need to be tested on induction wings, which takes 10 minutes. On induction wings in prisons, they sit there for a fortnight. They're bored stupid. They can't go to gym. They can't go to education. They can't go to work. They can't have visits. They sit there for a fortnight. All they do is English test, math test, STI, hearing. They sit there bored stupid. So as I said to the Justice Minister, give them an ADHD test. You're testing them for all these things they haven't got. The one thing nearly all of them have got, you're not testing them for. And it takes 10 minutes. And he said, right, absolutely. But then COVID hit. So we've just had to start again. And we've got a big meeting on the 23rd of February with the charity. This is what we're pushing for.
And I wish you for that, Sarah, honestly, all the absolute best. And if you're marching, I'll be there. I'll absolutely be there.
Yeah, come and join
amazing.
Us because,
it's amazing what you're doing.
About this.
I can hear you're very passionate. Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes and I want to make sure, because we only get the hour, and I want to make sure that we don't forget the other part of what you've been doing and spending time on that, really, because I discovered that you'd written the book, How Not to Murder Your Kids, Your ADHD Kid. And like everything, I've read about 2/3 of it. I'm not very good at getting to the end of anything, but I get the crux of it. But it's a very, very, very good book, and I found a lot of things for me that really helped, and certainly for my clients. And I know that you did the narration for the audio book, and it's also on Kindle. Please, can you? Actually, if you do 5 minutes for this and 5 minutes on a question, which I'm not going to ask you the same question I ask other people, because I want to ask you a different question.
Okay.
5 minutes, please tell us all about the book. What's it about? Who's it for?
I wrote the book because of all these boys in prison. I thought, how do I stop this? This is absolutely ludicrous. And I thought it goes right back to the parenting. It goes right back to getting the parents to understand their ADHD brains, that they're not just naughty little shits, that they do genuinely think they know best. They do genuinely risk take, thrill seek. They don't think of the consequences. They are impulsive. They are compulsive. If I could get the parents to understand that this is their ADHD and not to fight it and try and knock it out of them, but to understand it and work with them. So I wrote this book, and it says on the back that Sarah has worked in 4 English prisons and been dismayed at the amount of ADHD behind bars. The book is to stop that. The book is to help parents understand their kids' brains and to work with them, not against them. And I'm deeply, deeply humiliated, the wrong word, humbled, the right word, humbled by so many parents who said, this has changed our life at home, this has transformed our family home, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to stop the battles. I wanted to stop the screaming and the taking everything off them and the punishing them, and then it getting worse, and then fists going through walls and televisions being kicked in and all this. If you understand their ADHD brain and work with them, none of that happens. And if you take away all the things that they kick against, they won't be going out there nicking cars and thinking, right, sod you, mother, I'm going out tonight and I'm getting drunk and I'm going to go nick stuff and all this. Because if mum is on side and understands the brain and gives them the adrenaline in the proper way. So, one of my clients, my supervisor actually said, they were very wealthy. She said, buy a boat. Take him boating every weekend, get him out on the sea, and it worked. Because if the parents understand that they do need that adrenaline, they do need excitement, give it to them in a good way rather than going out nicking cars, getting into trouble way. So I wrote the book really to try and get to the parents early enough for them to understand the kids' brains so they don't go off the rails when they hit 10, 11, 12. That's why I wrote it. And it is helping, because I've had so many parents say, I get it now. I so get why he's like he is, and I don't react the way I used to. And I've got, happier households and people saying that it's transformed their life at home. That's why I wrote it.
And the reason it's so good is because it's so practical, and it's and it's absolutely well, it's authentic. There's no condescension. It's you understand because you've had the experience. You now know that, you know, the way you were when you were a kid was because of that. And you've read a lot and you've researched it. You know what you're talking about. You've got the experience. You've got 55 therapists at Head Stuff. You know, you've done so much. And like you listen to the person with 20 years experience, people listen to people who know what they're talking about. There's no point having a master's and a PhD and swallowed 1,000 dictionaries if you actually haven't been in the coalface and you don't know what you're talking about. And I will absolutely say, and I'm going to blow your trumpet for you, if you are ADHD, if you think you're ADHD, if you're a parent with ADHD kids, you need to go out and buy How Not to Murder Your ADHD Kid. It's in Amazon. Go and get it and absolutely do that. And what, you know, I do ask my podcast guests this sort of roundy, sort of umbrella type of neurodivergent question, but actually you've given me so much food for thought, and you would have definitely given our listeners so much food for thought. I have a question for you, and I hope you're happy to answer it. Now, the thing is I'm a really anthropologist, paleoanthropology. I'm really into the human race and the human being as we are. And I'm very aware that there's 9 million, well, heading towards eventually 9 million people going to be on the planet. It's about 7.8 at the moment, when there should really only be billion. There should only be 1.3 billion. So there's so much population and so many people in small places and so much sensory and the environment and everything else happening. So what we're doing, not just people going into the prison system, but generally speaking, you know, I've read Ed Halliwell's book. One of the first things I did was I went on YouTube for Thomas E. Brown to find out from him. And I listened to all these people. And I know that there is medication that is helping people when their traits of ADHD are becoming too much, they're overwhelming, and it calms people down. Isn't it a shame, though, that we're not able to do this in society? We're not able to go back to grassroots and parents and everything else and try and do it without medication. It's brilliant. I know it's brilliant that we've got the medication to help people, but how are we, if we don't go the medication route, how are we, Sarah, going to talk to parents and talk to society? And there might be an alternative. What message have you got to society to help people who are wired differently? Because that's all it is. We're just a different tribe. We're wired differently.
Well, yeah, I hear you. I mean, that's a question I could answer for about an hour, because I'm a big believer in medication, yes, especially for children. Yes. I see medication as putting the orange protector thing round children. Yeah. It massively helps. Yeah. But I mean, I do often say that I wish I could live in an ADHD world where everybody was ADHD, where we all drove at 100 miles an hour and we all pushed each other out. You know, I think the answer to that question is, it's such a boring phrase, but genuinely raising awareness, making people know what you can do and can't do. I was married to a husband for 10 years who had ASD. We know he was ASD. He wasn't diagnosed. 100% he was. It was in his family. And had I known that throughout those 10 years, it would have helped. I didn't know right till the end. I would have understood him a lot better. And I look back now and think, if I'd have had that knowledge, I'd have done so many things so differently. Yeah. And I think genuinely raising awareness, it's such a boring phrase, but I really mean it. People need to know what's going on in the prisons. That's awareness. Yes. They need to know that most of these boys are not, if they would sit and talk to them for half an hour, they'd fall in love with all of them. They're lovely boys. But can they stop nicking cars and getting into fights? And can they keep their tenancies? No. And do they want a bit of weed to calm their brain down? Yes. And we mustn't judge them for that. That is how they were born. There's an awful lot more ADHD people in the world than we think. There's an awful lot more ADHD people than there are ASD people. ASD people get a lot of good press and ADHD people get a lot of bad press. There's 10 times more people with ADHD than there are with ASD, very approximately, because you can't put figures on it because we don't know. And yet we get a very bad press. We are not naughty people. On the whole, we are very kind, caring people with more compassion. We've got more drive, more commitment. Hollywood is full of us. Most comedians are ADHD. All entrepreneurs are ADHD. There needs to be awareness of that You know, ADHD doesn't mean, I do a lot of presentations and I always say ADHD doesn't mean you're just a SEN kid. ADHD also means you're probably going to be a multimillionaire, that you're going to be an entrepreneur, that you're going to win at whatever you do. You're going to be Lewis Hamilton. You're going to be, you know, you're going to be all these winners. You're going to be Ant McPartlin. You can reach for the skies with ADHD and you will get there. This is the other thing I always say, is that we don't walk the middle path. You don't find people with ADHD who've worked for the council for 30 years. We're either in prison or we're an entrepreneur, you know, because we do everything to the extreme. But understand us, and more of us will be out there in business, in sport. I've got one example is I've got 3 of my naughtiest teenagers, and I mean naughty. All 3 have been arrested at least once, all 3 of them. One's now training to be a doctor, one a lawyer, and one a professional footballer, because they're now all diagnosed. They all came to see me for therapy. I told them, you can go down that path, love, if you want, but wouldn't it be far better to be successful? Because you've got that choice as well. And they've all now chosen to be doctor, lawyer, and footballer. And that's my big thing, is and that, you know, raise awareness that we're good and we're successful.
And yes, raising awareness, but you are doing bucketfuls of the other A word, buckets and buckets full throughout your life. It's raising awareness, yes, but it's taking action as well. And you are doing that every day. It's your raison d'etre, you know, you're doing it every day. You're taking action every day to get things changed. And Sarah, what can I say? You have taught me so much about how ADHD can be different. You've told our listeners about what to look out for, what the real figures are, you know, positive things that can really move society forward about understanding ADHD and other areas within neurodivergence, because many of us are, you know, have, I hate the word comorbidities, but we're
existing conditions.
We're a fruit salad. We have lots of things. We're different spectrums with many traits. I'd like to thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. It's been incredible, and I wish you every success for the way forward and the awareness and action you're taking. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Great pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
And I know that we're going to be talking afterwards. Thanks again, Sarah Templeton. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for listening to the Neurodivergence and Mental Health podcast. Links and resources will be at the end in the show notes. I very much look forward to meeting you again. Thanks for listening. Bye.